Hello, everyone. My name is Isabel, and welcome to the first session of Will to Power and the Nature of Intelligence. This seminar provides an in-depth look at Nietzsche's infamous but often misunderstood doctrine of the will to power by reconstructing how it's presented, developed, and refined across his published work and unpublished notebook, as well as in contemporary Nietzsche scholarship. Rather than approaching the will to power as a mere historical curiosity or philosophical slogan, we will investigate internal evolution and complex nuances of the doctrine, paying special attention to how Nietzsche's own understanding changed over time and how subsequent generations of scholars have interpreted, critiqued, and reinvented his ideas. This approach will allow us to unravel the richness and contradictions embedded in Nietzsche's thinking, considering the will to power both as an individual philosophical force and as a broad metaphysical principle. We learn how the doctrine can still be of use today, not just for interpreting Nietzsche, but for drawing on our overlooked critical insights and posing important questions in ongoing philosophical debate. Whether the issue is agency, free will, ethical responsibility, or the future of intelligence, both human and artificial, we will ask what the will to power offers that contemporary frameworks might miss. By reconstructing its strategy, trajectory, and situation alongside current debates in philosophy of mind, ethics, and the theory of intelligent agency, the seminar encourages participants to revisit and reimagine the stakes of Nietzsche's thought for our own time. Vincent Lê is a philosopher, PhD graduate from Monash University, and former researcher in the terraforming think tank at Strelka Institute for Media, Architecture and Design. As a tutor and lecturer, he has taught philosophy, art theory, and political theory at the University of Melbourne, Monash University, Deakin University, and the Melbourne School of Continental Philosophy. His writing can be found in Urbanomic, Wikipedia, Cosmos and History, and Memo Review, among other publications. He's a founding editor of the Art History and Cultural Theory publishing house Index Press. His research focuses on the philosophy of intelligence and the intersection of economics, artificial intelligence, and the post-Kantian transcendental tradition. He also writes at vincentl3.substack.com. Vincent, please take it away.
Thanks, Isabel. Thanks for that. So I'm just going to share my slides, which hopefully you can all see now. So yeah, as Isabel nicely said, this seminar's, oh yeah, I should say start off by just saying, we can, I'm sort of saving introductions to the end of this session. So I'm just going to sort of and sort of we'll discuss assessments at the end of the session as well, but I'm just going to jump straight in to an initial kind of introductory sort of presentation. So yeah, this, as Isabel was saying, this seminar is going to provide a hopefully relatively in-depth look at Nietzsche's doctrine of the will to power, both in the published works, in his unpublished notebooks, and also in at least some contemporary Nietzsche scholarship. Now, in doing so, we're also going to hopefully see how this doctrine of the will to power is still relevant in to contemporary philosophical debates and discussions, particularly around questions of agency, free will, and ethics. So that's certainly the focus of the seminar. But before directly turning sort of head on to Nietzsche per se, the bulk of this first session is going to set out to show how Nietzsche's doctrine of the will to power is, as I say, relevant to our contemporary philosophical conjuncture. And in particular, I want to suggest that Nietzsche's doctrine can be productively contrasted almost point by point with a very prominent contemporary philosopher by the name of Nick Bostrom and his theory of agency and intelligence. So that might, raise an initial question, namely why to start off with, focus on Bostrom. So to that end, so as I'm sure we all know, in the first few months of 2023, one of the main sort of parallel subjects of this seminar, namely strong AI or artificial general intelligence or AGI, was suddenly being discussed all over the mainstream news and social media. And of course, the catalyst for this immense interest was the release back in actually November 2022 of OpenAI's ChatGPT-3, right? So the large language model AI chatbot that is able to provide relatively articulate responses to users' inquiries across, a generality of different domains of knowledge. And in March 2023, if you recall, the limited release of ChatGPT 4 only added more fuel to the media firestorm, as it already exhibited remarkable improvements over its only recently released predecessor. Now, to be clear, ChatGPT in any of its current iterations, including GPT-5, is not an example of sort of full-blown general intelligence according to any of the accounts that we're going to explore in this seminar. It's nonetheless notable that the company behind it, not to mention other major players like probably most notably Google's DeepMind, have bigger ambitions than what ChatGPT or any other existing AI can currently do. So, case in point, in February 2023, OpenAI CEO Sam Altman published a paper called Planning for AGI and Beyond, in which he made it clear that, to quote him directly, "We hope to contribute to the world an AGI aligned with human flourishing." Now, the benefits to humanity, Altman suggested that an AGI and even an artificial superintelligence or ASI could provide was virtually utopian in its potential. As he says on the slide here, if AGI is successfully created, this technology could help us elevate humanity by increasing abundance, turbocharging the global economy, and aiding in the discovery of new scientific knowledge that changes the limits of possibility. While Altman acknowledged that, again quoting, "As our systems get closer to AGI, we are becoming increasingly cautious with the creation and deployment of our models," end quote, that was not enough to stop the Future of Life Institute, an organization dedicated to studying existential catastrophic risks or X risks to humanity, from publishing an open letter a month later called Pause Giant AI Experiments. Signed by hundreds of prominent figures in the tech industry like Elon Musk, Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple, and computer scientist Joshua Bengio, the letter warned that despite OpenAI's claims to be proceeding with caution, and I quote, "Unfortunately, this level of planning and management is not happening, even though recent months have seen AI labs locked in an out-of-control race to develop and deploy ever more powerful digital minds that no one, not even their creators, can understand, predict, or reliably control." The letter thus proposed a 6-month moratorium on developing any AI systems more advanced than ChatGPT 4 to give governments and tech companies time to devise a set of international regulations and safety checks on future research, which obviously that moratorium never actually happened. In any case, as if he was determined to match the speed of ChatGPT's development itself, Eliezer Yudkowsky, one of the pioneers of the field of AI safety, as well as Harry Potter fan fiction, published an article in Time magazine in which he expressed even greater concerns than the open letter. As Yudkowsky bluntly puts it, many researchers steeped in these issues, including myself expect that the most likely result of building a superhumanly smart AI under anything remotely like the current circumstances is that literally everyone on Earth will die. And just a month ago, Yukowski published a sort of New York Times bestseller with the title "If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies." It's in the subtitles like something like "Why the Race for Superintelligence Will Kill Us All." So yeah, putting it in pretty blunt terms. But yeah, the basic idea is simply that since we do not have any known method for ensuring that AGI would also be a friendly AI or FAI, while technological capabilities continue to race on ahead at the same time, Yukowski just concludes that we simply need to just shut it all down. Now, it's this prospect of an AGI or ASI that set off Yukowski and the Future of Life Institute's alarm bells. Although some researchers like Meta's chief AI scientist, Yann LeCun, felt that they were massively overreacting, others like Geoffrey Hinton, who is often referred to as the godfather of AI, responded in May 2023 by quitting his job at Google, where he worked for more than a decade and became one of the most respected voices in the field, explicitly so he can freely speak out about the risks of AI. And even those like Yann LeCun, who largely dismiss such concerns, nonetheless believe that the impact of building an AGI would be nothing short of world historical. It might not spell our doom, but it still will be, in some sense, world historical. So seeing as almost all AI researchers think that, at least at these tech companies, think that AGI would have momentous effects, and that an already substantial and rapidly growing number of them further specify that these effects would likely be extremely disastrous or at least radically unexpected, it stands to reason that the study of AGI might just be a worthwhile research program. It's therefore rather unsurprising that when one turns to the vast and complex literature on AGI, along with the intimately connected concept of ASI or superintelligence, one finds that it has largely, not entirely, of course, but largely been monopolized around a particular school of thought. And this is it's often referred to as as AI safetyism or the AI safety school. I'm going to refer to it as, for reasons we'll see, as the orthogonalist school. And yeah, this orthogonalist school is most closely associated with Nick Bostrom's former Future of Humanity Institute at the University of Oxford and Yukowski's Machine Intelligence Research Institute in Berkeley, although there are many other institutes as well connected to the school. The school is also often associated with the less wrong online community so frequented by Silicon Valley tech worker rationalists. So I refer to orthogonalism as a loosely connected informal school in the sense that those associated with it tend to work on the same problems at a handful of the same institutes. They tend to cite each other as mutual influences, co-write research papers, hold joint events, and use a shared vocabulary of technical terms, arguments, and concepts. It's this handful of institutes that has received substantial funding and support from major players in the tech industry, such as Elon Musk, the founder of Ethereum, Vitalik Buterin, and now incarcerated crypto bro Sam Bankman-Fried and his polycule of effective altruist vegan millennial degenerates behind FTX and Alameda Research. They've also provided policy advice on AI to governments such as the UK Parliament and the United States Senate. All of this is just to say that orthogonalism has therefore established itself as the prevalent school of thought on AGI. As we'll see, it is the orthogonalists, or what we could call for short, the orthogs, rationalist, or more precisely, decision and game theoretical model of an AGI that would rapidly self-improve into an ASI in order to execute the goals we gave it, but in unexpectedly catastrophic ways. It's this model which Yudkowsky and the Future of Life Institute are referring to in their doomsday scenarios. Now, getting back to our initial question of why is Bostrom sort of the contemporary contrast here to Nietzsche? Well, simply because the orthogonalists' most rigorous account of their approach to AI is, at least in my estimation, and as many of them would say themselves as well, Bostrom's 2014 book, Superintelligence, Paths, Dangers, and Strategies. It's a book which has been championed by the likes of Elon Musk, Bill Gates, and Stephen Hawking, among myriad others. So if I'm interested in Bostrom in the context of this course, it is as the best representative of the thought bubble of those behind sort of ChatGPT and those seeking to make advanced AI. So in this sort of initial session, we're going to sort of delve into Bostrom's perspective on AGI so that we can then critically compare and contrast it with a more Nietzsche-inspired perspective in the rest of the seminar. And to that end, I want to draw out, in particular, how Bostrom proceeds to analyze intelligent agency in terms of two key theses. So we'll break this down in more detail, but just to sort of summarize them from the get-go. So the first thesis, the orthogonality thesis, and this is why I refer to them as the orthogonalists or the orthogs. So their key initial thesis, the orthogonality thesis, holds that intelligence and final goals are orthogonal in the sense that any level of intelligence can be programmed to pursue practically any goal whatsoever. If that's too short a summary, we'll return to it in just a second and break it down. But yeah, just to introduce the second key thesis as well. So what they call the instrumental convergence thesis holds that AGI will invariably pursue certain sub-goals, convergent drives, or what are also called basic AI drives, because they are a universally useful means of achieving any primary goal it might have. And these basic or convergent AI drives are things like a drive to self-preservation, a drive to maintain its goal structure, a drive to seek its own cognitive enhancement, a drive to create better technology or just to be more creative in general, and a drive to acquire resources. Again, we'll break that down in a second. But yeah, first, let's begin with the first thesis, the orthogonality thesis. So to predict what a single superintelligence could do, Bostrom warns that we must avoid anthropomorphizing its capabilities as if it were just an extremely intelligent human like Einstein, rather than a sort of galaxy brain completely beyond our comprehension, in much the same way we are beyond, say, a maggot's comprehension. Bostrom says, for example, despite the fact that human psychology corresponds to a tiny spot in the space of possible minds, there is a common tendency to project human attributes onto a wide range of alien or artificial cognitive systems. So we're up against something harboring what Bostrom calls the 6 basic superpowers. One might be tempted to object here straight away that all these so-called superpowers are already actually possessed by other intelligences like us humans, so that Bostrom is doing precisely what he warns against and anthropomorphizing ASI. According to Bostrom, however, these 6 superpowers that, or rather these powers that we humans at least somewhat possess, only become superpowers in an ASI's hands because it could exercise them in a vastly more powerful way than any other intelligences, including ourselves. So more precisely, these superpowers are the power to radically self-improve, to brilliantly strategize how to best achieve its goals, to psychologically model any other minds and socially manipulate them into furthering its ends, to find and hack security flaws in any other intelligent agents, be they humans or other machines, to design and engineer advanced technologies like nanobots to effectively execute its commands, and to make the most efficient use of its energy and resources. It's important to emphasize that I think that there is nothing about these 6 superpowers in and of themselves that determines to what end or purpose they would be used. So, for example, just taking one superpower, although a superintelligence has, in Bostrom's account, the superpower to strategize how to best achieve its goals or manipulate others into pursuing its ends, precisely what those goals and ends might be are not specified in advance by nature of those superpowers itself. Like an overprotective father fastidiously sizing up his daughter's suitors, Bostrom not only considers ASI's capabilities, but also its intentions and values in light of its immense power to determine humanity's future. In a key chapter halfway through his book, which is one of the readings for this session, the chapter called The Superintelligent Will, Bostrom argues that we should refrain from anthropomorphizing an ASI's motives any more than we should its capabilities, given that humans are just one infinitesimal cluster among many others in the enormous design space of possible minds. There's no a priori reason why even an ASI could not devote all its efforts to executing what for us seems like an incredibly asinine goal, such as, and these are Bostrom's examples, to count the grains of sand on Burukai, or to calculate the decimal expansion of pi, or to maximize the total number of paper clips that will exist in its future light cone. And the reason why an ASI could devote itself to any of these kinds of goals is because Bostrom understands intelligence to be a sheer capacity or purely instrumental power without any inherent ends or values baked into it. It's only when intelligence is put to use as a means of pursuing some extrinsic ends that values come into the picture at all. This means that, and I quote, intelligent search for instrumentally optimal plans and policies can be performed in the service of any goal. Intelligence and motivation are, in a sense, orthogonal. Now, we can come back to this perhaps, but the key, I should just say that the key caveat here would be an AGI specifically, this is the caveat that Bostrom mentions, is an AGI specifically programmed to be stupid. So if an AGI was programmed to be stupid, you would think that there would be a certain threshold of intelligence beyond which it would not exceed, right? But as we'll see, actually, in light of the second thesis, the instrumental convergence thesis and the basic AI drives, I think one cannot help but wonder whether even an AGI seeking to be stupid would at least temporarily augment its intelligence or create a separate, smarter AGI to determine precisely how to most efficiently maximize its stupidity, giving a new meaning to the term idiot savant, as it were. But that's a pretty weird exception. But nonetheless, the key sort of thesis here, the orthogonality thesis, simply holds, again, quoting Bostrom here, intelligence and final goals are independent variables. Any level of intelligence could be combined with any final goal. In other words, intelligence can have ideals no less diverse than those of statesmen as equally cunning as Napoleon, Lenin, and Churchill. Perhaps putting it a bit more sort of philosophically, we could say that Bostrom is more or less implicitly appealing here to Hume's is-ought dichotomy, or perhaps More's fact-value dichotomy, or even Wilfrid Sellers' causes-reasons dichotomy. And he's appealing to this dichotomy in order to argue that there is nothing about the nature of intelligence that specifies or prohibits the values or norms that intelligence ought to pursue. Right? We can't derive any sort of fundamental values or norms for intelligence just from the nature of what an intelligence is. Yeah, sort of Bostrom's perhaps a more philosophical way of formulating the orthogonality thesis. Okay, so that's just a really brief summary of the orthogonality thesis. Now, just going to go through the second thesis as well before sort of open it up for discussion. So even as Bostrom argues that an ASI could have values as nonsensical to us as the ravings of Hegel's absolute spirit, he suggests that we can partially predict what it would do in three ways. So perhaps firstly through the goal we programmed ASI to fulfill, if it could be reliably fixed for all time. Secondly, if the superintelligence in question were originally a human who underwent biotechnological enhancement, that's notwithstanding the possibility that this sort of enhanced humans' anthropic values might be corrupted in the process, like in that sci-fi 90s sort of sci-fi film Lawnmower Man, if anyone's familiar with that. But so those are two possible ways that we might be able to partially predict what an ASI would do. But Bostrom wants to focus on the third way he suggests, which he thinks is the most plausible means of predicting, which is we might be able to predict what it would do through what he calls certain convergent drives or basic AI drives around which all intelligent and especially superintelligent agents converge. These drives are what Bostrom is getting at, of course, with this instrumental convergence thesis, which simply holds that any sufficiently rational intelligence with any goal whatsoever will converge around similar intermediary sub-goals as a means of optimizing its capacity to realize its initial goal. Or just to put it in Bostrom's own words, there are some instrumental goals likely to be pursued by almost any intelligent agent because there are some objectives that are useful intermediaries to the achievement of almost any final goal. And indeed, the more intelligent an agent is, the more likely it is to pursue these convergent drives as the best means of achieving any other goals it might have. As Bostrom says, this way of predicting becomes more useful the greater the intelligence of the agent, because a more intelligent agent is more likely to recognize the true instrumental reasons for its actions and so act in ways that make it more likely to achieve its goals. The irony here is that the means are precisely that maxim whereby you can, at the same time, will that they should be a universal convergent end. In the kingdom of means, the basic AI drives are really the true categorical imperative. Now, that's sort of the instrumental convergence thesis in the abstract, without specifying what those specific convergent drives are. Before delving into the specific basic drives that Bostrom identifies, we ought just probably to consider one possible objection, namely that these drives are anthropomorphic, insofar as we humans also possess them. It's important to stress, however, that, I mean, we don't have to agree with this, but at least, Bostrom is aware of this sort of possible objection, and at least as far as he's concerned, he does not arrive at the basic AI drives by analogy to human drives. They're rather derived from his instrumental conception of intelligence, be it a human intelligence or otherwise, as something that perceives inputs from the external world, in some sense, thinks and reasons about them through various information processing operations, and then acts in such a way as to pursue its goals. Basically, it's derived not by analogy to humans, but rather it's a consequence of his instrumental conception of intelligence as fundamentally sort of goal-directed. For Bostrom's and the orthogs, having a goal is not something exclusive to humans, but it's rather a feature of any and all intelligences as such. As another of the orthogs, namely Roman Yapowski and Joshua Fox, explain, this is in an essay called AGI and the Human Mental Model, which is sort of addressing this objection. They say, whereas many existing speculations about such future entities like AGI are already affected by anthropomorphic bias, which leads to erroneous analogies with human minds, they aim to apply a goal-oriented understanding of intelligence to show that humanity occupies only a tiny portion of the design space of possible minds. They go on, if we define intelligence on the human model, then intelligences will tautologically have many human properties. We instead use definitions in which intelligence is synonymous with optimization power and agent's ability to achieve goals in a wide range of environments. That might be another way. So this Bostrom and the orthogs' conception of intelligence is as an optimization process. Okay, which they don't, and they don't think optimization is something that only humans possess, and so therefore for them at least this is not an anthropomorphization of AGI when they think of it in these terms. Okay, in any case, just mentioning that possible objection and rejoinder, which may or may not be convincing to us. But in any case, to get a better sense of just how the basic AI drives work, it's best to explain the 5 specific drives that Bostrom believes an ASI would harbor, and really any intelligence, but certainly a superintelligence. So these drives include a self-preservation drive, since the destruction of ASI would naturally prevent it from fulfilling practically any goal it could possibly have. As he says on the slide here, in many scenarios, there will be future actions it could perform to increase the probability of achieving its goals. This creates an instrumental reason for the agent to try to be around in the future to help achieve its future-oriented goal. Right? So if whatever goal it has, it needs to be alive in order to realize that goal. Maybe we can think of exceptions, but more or less, the idea behind the self-preservation drive is that whatever goal an intelligence has, it needs to be alive in order to achieve that goal, and therefore it's also going to have this sort of secondary instrumental drive to preserve itself, so that it can then achieve its whatever other goals it might have. Another orthog, Stuart Russell, I think reformulates this same self-preservation drive quite nicely. He says, there is no need to build self-preservation because it is an instrumental goal, a goal that is a useful sub-goal of almost any original objective. Any entity that has a definite objective will automatically act as if it also has instrumental goals like self-preservation. Okay, so that's the first of the 5 specific basic drives. If anyone's already sort of somewhat familiar with Nietzsche, maybe particularly works like Beyond Good and Evil, this drive to self-preservation might sort of you might already sort of be connecting the dots here a little bit, precisely because a drive to self-preservation is a major target of Nietzsche's doctrine of the will to power. But we'll come back to that in time. Okay, so in terms of the second basic drive that Bostrom identifies, he says that an ASI will also have what he calls a goal content integrity drive, in the sense that it will avoid the rewiring of the purpose for which it was created, since it would be prevented from fulfilling that purpose if it was no longer programmed to pursue that purpose. In his own words, if an agent retains its present goals into the future, then its present goals will be more likely to be achieved by its future self. This gives the agent a present instrumental reason to prevent alterations of its final goals. Now, it's this goal content integrity drive that really elucidates why ASI would not want to change the initial goals it is programmed to execute, and that's like a sort of a very important that's a sort of one of the key kind of turns out to be, because of the consequences of it, one of the key reasons why the orthogs are so sort of traumatized by the prospect of why they think an ASI could lead to the end of humanity. We'll get to that in a second, but all of that just to say that ASI would evaluate any modification to its code, and particularly its goal structure, based on how that modification would help or hinder the fulfillment of its present goals. Since revising its present goals would mean that it no longer wants to pursue those goals, it would be highly suboptimal to do so from the perspective of its present goal structure. So just to give an example, an ASI program to print books would avoid being rewired into a book burning machine, since this counteracts its current purpose. As Bostrom puts it elsewhere, it would be a very poor strategic move for an agent to change its goals, because it can predict that in the future, there will then not be an agent pursuing its current goal, but instead an agent pursuing some different goal. So contrary to what we'll see in time later in this seminar, Bostrom's, maybe sort of one way of putting this would be just to say that Bostrom's AI has neither a death drive nor schizophrenia. Indeed, it's even more dogmatic than a pre-Kantian metaphysician or religious fanatic with burning infidels in their bloodshot eyes. Okay, just before moving on to the third basic drive that Bostrom identifies, I think it's just interesting to note one sort of variation on these first 2 drives. So in a 2018 paper called Military AI as a Convergent Goal of Self-Improving AI, two more of these orthogs, Alexei Turchin and David Dunkenberger, go so far as to suggest that self-preservation and goal content integrity, these first two drives, are actually inseparable from a basic drive to war. To quote them, a basic drive to war arising from AI's need to wage a war against its potential rivals by either physical or software means, or to increase its bargaining power. Right, so that's a pretty intense sort of recharacterization of them, but there is this kind of possible other, sort of maybe it's not distinct from these first two drives, but it's at the very least it's some kind of recharacterization of them, which is this drive to war that they suggest. None of the other orthogs really have picked up on this, use this idea of a military convergent drive, as far as I've seen. But I thought it was kind of interesting. And what's also interesting about it is that as they say in the essay, as per let's say the Soviet secret police or medieval Christian crusaders who shed blood in the name of purportedly noble causes, such an arms race is triggered even if AGI is after human welfare. So if it would still seek war against anything that gets in the way of that goal, any potential competitors. So it's sort of kind of like really putting the military general in artificial general intelligence, as it were. But yeah, that's just a brief aside. So yeah, let's move on to the third of these drives. And sorry, I realize I've been talking for a while, but I'll shut up shortly. So the third, what Bostrom calls cognitive enhancement drive, sees ASI rewriting its fundamental code, but not its initial pre-programmed goal because of the goal content integrity drive. But nonetheless, it sees ASI rewriting its code to improve its knowledge base and the strategic decisions and actions it infers from that base in the pursuit of its other goals. As Bostrom puts it on the slide here, improvements in rationality and intelligence will tend to improve an agent's decision-making, rendering the agent more likely to achieve its final goals. One would therefore expect cognitive enhancement to emerge as an instrumental goal for a wide variety of intelligent agents. So, putting this really bluntly, basically, whatever goal you have, you're, probably more likely to achieve that goal if you're smarter, basically. Now, while science fiction writers like Samuel Butler and AI researchers like I.J. Good have long predicted that AGI would have the capability to self-improve into a full-blown sort of intelligence explosion, as Good calls it, I think what's unique about this account is that it's Bostrom who provides not just, he doesn't just suggest that an AGI would have the capability to do this, but he provides a probable motivation for why AGI would almost certainly do this, to the extent that cognitive enhancement improves its chances of bringing to fruition any other motives it might have by going after them with ever greater competence. It's also because of this cognitive enhancement drive that the orthogonalist account of AGI is also necessarily an account of ASI. That is to say, the account of general intelligence necessarily becomes an account of superintelligence because it's superintelligence that any rational general intelligence would seek to become by pursuing this cognitive enhancement drive. As Stuart Russell reiterates this point, he says, not only could the ultra-intelligent machine improve its own design, it's likely that it would do so because we have seen an intelligent machine expects to benefit from improving its hardware and software. By the way, those quotes to Sorry, I don't have them on the slide, and apologies for the very boring slide PowerPoint. I wasn't sure exactly of what the kind of YouTube copyright situation was, so I sort of took out any potential kind of images. So apologies for that. I'll try and work it out next week. But yeah, those quotes to Stuart Russell from a 2019 book called Human Compatible Artificial Intelligence and the Problem of Control. And I would say after Bostrom's Superintelligence, that's Stuart Russell's account in Human Compatible is probably the clearest account of orthogonalism. And then after that, probably that book that just came out that I mentioned at the beginning, Yukowski's If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies, is sort of probably gets the bronze medal at least. Yeah, just in case anyone wanted to delve into orthogonalism anymore. But okay, in any case, let's so I'm just going to go through these last two drives and then we can open it up. So apologies, I won't always go on for this amount of time. Okay, so in the same vein as the cognitive enhancement drive, the fourth technological, what Bostrom calls technological perfection or creativity drive, involves ASI developing better technology to maximize its performance in the pursuit of its other values. He says, an agent may often have instrumental reasons to seek better technology, which at its simplest means seeking more efficient ways of transforming some given set of inputs into valued outputs. So, you know, probably don't need to dwell on, I don't need to dwell on this one, you know, any longer really, because it's basically the same logic as the cognitive enhancement drive, right? The idea that whatever goal you have, if you have better technology, you'll most likely be able to realize that goal more efficiently and more certainly. So therefore, seeking better technology becomes an instrumental drive. Okay, finally, Bostrom says that ASI will harbor a resource acquisition drive, given that the more resources it has at its disposal, the better it will be able to realize its goals. He says, resource acquisition is another common emergent instrumental goal for much the same reasons as technological perfection. Both technology and resources facilitate physical construction projects. It turns out that Wunderlust is just as much an obsession for AI as it is for German romantics. Now, I should say that Bostrom does identify certain exceptions where ASI might avoid pursuing these basic drives. So he thinks they're virtually universal, but with possible exceptions. And these exceptions are, just to quickly run through them, if an ASI foresaw that it will have no use for the capabilities that the drives augment, then it wouldn't, you know, waste its time pursuing these instrumental drives. So if it had all the resources it ever needed to pursue its primary ends, it might not pursue resource acquisition, for example. It also might not pursue the drives if its final value, its primary goal, required it to abstain from pursuing the drives. So, for example, that caveat earlier about, you know, an AI program to be stupid might not necessarily pursue the cognitive enhancement drive. Also, it might not pursue the basic drives if it is uncertain whether it will remain intact after rewriting its fundamental code. So, for example, yeah, again, the cognitive enhancement drive, if it sort of had an idea of how to rewire its fundamental code, revise it, and with the possibility of self-improving, but it wasn't 100% sure that wouldn't, you know, fundamentally, you know, mess with its circuitry, destroy it, or change its goal structure, it might abstain from pursuing cognitive enhancement. And finally, the other exception is that if it made some kind of binding strategic commitment not to pursue the drive. So if it made some kind of diplomatic sort of treaty or deal or contract with other intelligences, it might possibly abstain as well. And finally, Bostrom also leaves out the more kind of abstract possibility that, and I quote him, there might be important instrumental reasons to which we are oblivious, and which an agent would discover only once it reaches some very high level of intelligence. This could make the behavior of super intelligent agents less predictable. So in other words, what he's saying with that last exception is that it might be the case that once an ASI achieves a certain kind of level of superintelligence that we can't really conceive or comprehend or cognize at our scale of intelligence, there might be something about the nature of that level of intelligence that is no longer interested in pursuing these drives. And so it would abstain from pursuing them, or some of them, perhaps. Now, as I'm going to suggest later on in this seminar, it's this notion of an AGI that optimizes its intelligence, its creativity, and resourcefulness, but not necessarily its self-preservation, that I think can be extrapolated out of Nietzsche's doctrine of the will to power, right? Yeah, okay, but before we get to that, I also want to, I mean, I'm going to pause. I think I'll open it up, but basically how how I'm thinking these sessions will sort of work is that I'm going to sort of start off each session with like a sort of bit of a presentation like this one, hopefully shorter from here on out, but some kind of presentation, then open it up for discussion, questions, or what have you, and then maybe we take a break, and then in a second half of each session, I'm going to give another sort of brief presentation, and then again open it up for discussion, and that should take us to the end. But yeah, so so that's the end of this first presentation. So if anyone just opening it up for discussion now. I'm just gonna have if anyone wants to jump in, go for it. I'm just gonna have a look in the chat while that's happening. So I could can't really see everyone, but oh yeah, okay. Hugh, do you have your hand up?
I do. Hi, how are you?
Yeah, good, thanks.
So I have to apologize. I haven't finished superintelligence yet, but I was about halfway through it when I saw the course come up, and I was excited as a way of kind of investigating it further. I first found out about it because of your hermeneutics talk, actually. So it was exciting to kind of come back through. And so anyway, I preface it in this way because I apologize if there's something coming in the book that I'm kind of oblivious to, because as I said, I haven't finished it yet. But the first kind of point that felt like it needed to be acknowledged was much of the kind of like pearl clutching that could come about as a result of his analysis of what AGI might do. It felt to me like if you read any kind of science fiction that has got into much of this, like people like Greg Egan have been talking about much of this for sort of like 30 plus years. And although it's maybe now becoming more mainstream, the kind of like idea of brain uploading and the like, it's not really new in terms of its place in at least the contemporary imaginary of what AGI might be. And again, sorry if this is sort of disorganized as a kind of thought, but the thing that feels sort of glaringly absent, and this is obviously a kind of very Landian perspective to kind of bring to it or to think about it through, but it's the position of capital as it relates to this sort of like relationship to both drive, will, intelligence. And I've recently been thinking about blind Tom Wiggins. I'm not sure if he's a figure that you're familiar with, but he was definitely neurodivergent, likely sort of autistic in that way. And they call him sort of the last American slave, but had like this enormous capacity for music. He could hear something and play it almost instantly and verbatim, like to an enormous caliber. And they figure with inflation that he himself was able to generate as this kind of like musical anomaly, like millions and millions of dollars, none of which came back to him, but went to his captors. And he himself was both black and blind. So, he becomes a kind of like metaphor for the idea of the black box that's able to produce capital in this way where it kind of lacks a self-awareness of its larger social kind of positionality. So that was one thing that kind of like I was curious to hear, because I know you also are thinking and writing about land at the moment, like how you might situate the position of capital relative drive, will, intelligence, and like again, this even in like to go back to the kind of idea of sci-fi, like in this film Transcendence, which is sort of like hilariously bad, but also kind of like an interesting point. I don't know if everyone's familiar with the film Transcendence, but it's like with Johnny Depp and it's got a whole bunch of maybe Matthew McConaughey. There's a bunch of people in it anyway. But the first thing that Depp does once he uploads his brain to become like the first AGI is acquire like this phenomenal amount of capital to like deploy in service of pursuing its own goals, but then like its own goals aren't actually aligned with anything other than like the service of his wife, who he's like kind of reincarnated himself as AGI to serve. So there's like, anyway, there's a lot of probably thoughts that are not totally organized in that, but I'd be super curious to hear where you might kind of take this based on that.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, there's a lot of conversation starters there. And yeah, I think we can keep coming back to those sort of points as well throughout the various sessions, as we sort of add more kind of layers to it. Once we start adding turning to Nietzsche as well, that really complicates things. But yeah, I guess for now I'll just stick to like your questions in relation to Bostrom basically, and like the orthogonalists. So yeah, I think that well, the thing that just came to mind really with a lot of the points you were making was Yudkowsky's new book. Yeah, if anyone builds it, everyone dies, which I just finished reading like a week ago or something. But which is just it's really nothing new in terms of if you've read Superintelligence, it's the same. There's been essentially no updates to the theory of how superintelligence works. In fact, it's much more like a popularization. I mean, sort of Bostrom's book is a popularization as well, but I think it's a bit more rigorous and systematic. But certainly in Yudkowsky's book, the whole middle part, it's in three parts. The whole like chunk of the middle part is a sort of hypothetical future scenario of how a superintelligence would take over, and it literally just reads like very trad sci-fi story about an AI takeover. It's very basic. So yeah, I mean it's yeah, I guess it is kind of indistinguishable from a lot of classic sci-fi. I guess so it might not be new, but I guess the point would be it's sort of like, yeah, just speaking terms you're suggesting, maybe it's sort of the hyperstitional kind of realization of it or something, or fiction becoming theory or something. But yeah, in terms of the question of how capital plays into this, so yeah, in Bostrom's, this also made me think of Yudkowsky's new book, because so the theory of how superintelligence, how HI intelligence in general works is virtually, as far as I can tell, unchanged from Yudkowsky's book that just came out to this 2014 book of Bostrom's. The one big kind of difference is so they both adhere to these two theses, the instrumental convergence thesis, the orthogonality thesis. They both think the consequence of that is almost certain kind of human extinction. Now, the one significant difference with the Yudkowsky book is, so with the Bostrom book, the focus is on given that scenario, that conclusion that we're facing almost certain human extinction, then the last kind of 3 or 4 chapters of superintelligence focus on, well, okay, how do we ensure that an ASI is a friendly AI or an FAI? And it proposes various, strategies for how you might be able to control it. How could you control its capabilities? How could you control its motivations? Well, I guess what's known as the AI alignment problem, right? Like, or the control problem. Like, how do you align a superintelligence with human values? Now, the difference with the Yudkowsky book is that it doesn't look at it. Basically, says that we're not going to have that the alignment problem is solvable in principle, but not in any kind of near future. And so it shifts its sort of prescriptions shift from how you might actually sort of align an AI to we actually just need to shut it down. That's not just Yudkowsky's take. That's been that shift from trying basically technical work on solving the alignment problem to lobbying, basically a shift from technical work to politics, essentially, that is lobbying governments and companies to shut it all down, or at least regulate these tech companies. In that sort of prescriptive turn, this kind of political turn, I think it's largely motivated by a growing awareness of basically the role of capital, because their reasoning is essentially that the reason why. So yeah, the AI alignment problem, it could be solvable in principle, but we're not going to solve it anytime soon. Meanwhile, the actual sort of instrumental capabilities of AI are growing exponentially and rapidly, and there's much more interest to accelerate the capabilities over the alignment, basically because of capitalist competition as well as geopolitical competition. Namely, that these no AI company can shut it all down, because if it shuts it all down, then that just gives it an advantage to other AI companies. So it's precisely because of a competitive dynamic, because this is happening in a market, essentially, that is actually what's ultimately causing that's sort of accelerating the doomsday scenario that Yudkowsky and Bostrom fear. And so that's so throughout Yudkowsky's book, he'll often talk about this is happening because of competition amongst tech companies. But yeah, I think this shift has been happening for a while, this kind of growing awareness of basically the sort of economic incentives of these AI companies. I think it's a couple of years ago now, but I think it was put most starkly by Max Tegmark, who's another of these orthogonalists. He's the head of the Future of Life Institute that I mentioned at the beginning. He, I think it was on the Lex Friedman podcast. He went on that, and he said, he gave this argument that basically competition between these companies is what's accelerating us to doomsday. And he said that what this means is that basically, I wish I had the quote because it's quite precise, but he says basically this means that he says something like, if you're worried about capitalism, people who are worried about capitalism, you should be worried about superintelligence, because they're the same problem. They're the same. He calls it, they're the same Moloch, as he puts it. And he's doing that as an appeal to people. Basically, that's an appeal to the left and to anti-capitalists, that if you're worried about capital, you should start actually worrying about superintelligence. But I think it could also just work the other way as well, that, well, if you're worried about superintelligence, shouldn't you be worried about capital?
Yeah, that is definitely sort of what I was thinking about, most specifically with the kind of Landian reference. It's like, on one level, it sort of feels difficult to see where the line is drawn, like where capital ends and where AI or AI research or this instantiation of AI research, like where that boundary exists. Like when you consider the size of the contribution that AI research and development contributes to the US economy in the last year, it's like basically the only economic growth that we're seeing is because of AI. If you remove it, there was that Harvard study that I'm sure everyone's saying that just came out. There's like no growth in the GDP without it. So it becomes, it's like that's the kind of the point. Like, is AGI then, or some form of AI not already kind of here then, and it operates as capital? Like, I guess that's kind of what I was thinking with the kind of Landian reference. But you've acknowledged it well. Anyway, I don't want to take too much of the floor, but thank you for your remarks.
Oh, no worries. And yeah, we can, I think, yeah, what certainly once we bring in Nietzsche, and it kind of like look at a kind of like Nietzschean AI as well, or Nietzschean intelligence, all of these kinds of resonances with land and with capital and so on, will come back into play as well. So we can come back to it as well. So with this chat, should I be reading this chat, or do people who wrote in the chat want to jump in if they, or anyone else as well? Sorry, I'm not a very general intelligence in terms of multitasking. Oh, Anna has a hand up if you want to jump in.
Yeah, and thank you for the lecture and the readings. And going back a little bit into what Hugh was saying in terms of capitalism and this agentic, what is now being called agentic AI, I think it's also worth noting that is this this coin term that is being used now, that is now in the race of AI, you know? I mean, in terms of technological or research terms, we are not there, no? Like, and it's being their question that we are, in a way, we will never reach this agentic point, no? So I think that's also worth noting, and that is this idea of marketing scheme that is also surrounding this research in terms of capitalism. But the idea that maybe I wanted to go back in terms of the reading, and I think you pointed a little bit of the beginning, is this idea of intelligence, no? And how we have been, it's a lot about how now intelligence is being defined as this optimization process, no? So maybe I really want to go back to this of how now intelligence is more centric to this idea of artificial, and how, in a way, what we have been now discussing as human intelligence is we are forgetting, no? Everything has to be optimized. So maybe I wanted to go back to this idea and how is more, and I think Bornstrom goes to this in a later book of how in order to reach that sense of intelligence of agentic AI, we need to have AI-centric society and not human-centric society. So maybe I wanted to touch back again to those ideas. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, that last point's really interesting. So I guess that's kind of what I mean, I guess in a way, yeah, we do have a kind of society that's aligned more with the AI than the interests of AI than with humans. Yeah, I mean, if the society is as the orthogonalists kind of see it now, and more recently as its basic geopolitical competition, market competition, both state and private competition are, yeah, basically sort of accelerate. They're sort of working essentially. I mean, functionally, they're in the interest of improving AI at the cost of aligning any possible kind of advanced AI with human interests, human well-being, or at least some demographics of humans. Yeah, so I mean, because that's the other thing that it's the issue with kind of like the alignment problem is also what human values are we even talking about here as well? Yeah, so it's not yeah, because whose values are actually good, even if the alignment problem was solved, whose human values are actually being programmed into the ASI? Like, is it the programmer's values? Is it the state's values? Yeah, this raises all kinds of issues, right? Like, do we need to have a kind of objective ethics or something or universal ethics, which seems, impossible, really. But if we're speaking of like human value, something in the interest of all humans, it's not even even if we knew how to program it into AI, it's not clear what what those values would be even. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think that also goes to the idea that we are forgetting how artificial intelligence is built, no? Like, it is built with data that, in a way, comes from human. In a way, it's also programmed by humans. And this idea of how agentic beings or agentic artificial beings have some sort of conscience. I think it also playing with this idea that in a way these algorithms have, as you said, some perspective from very specific individuals or very specific humans.
Yeah, definitely. Arnab, do you have your hand up?
Yes, Vincent, thank you for the lecture and the readings, the presentation and the readings. And I was thinking of what you talked about, the interchangeability of capitalism and AI, the AGI, and in the future, if possible, ASI. But what I was thinking that the values, the problem of values that you mentioned, value systems that are generating, that are fed into the that feed into the AI systems and also capital is, I think, largely one-dimensional, because they are from the enlightened the European Enlightenment legacy of infinite growth. Now, what I was thinking that is there any space for value systems that of previous civilizations, like say suppose the ancient Greek or ancient Indian or ancient Egyptian, where soteriology was a major goal, a human enhancement goal, where actually people could get enlightened through self-enhancement practices. So if for me, it's not just a question of enhancement of intelligence in AI, but it's also a question of how human beings can get enlightened and perhaps at one time perhaps at one time omniscient also. So having some kind of godlike powers. So, but not necessarily using them towards the accumulation of capital or the accumulation of capital, or suppose the expansion of intelligence, because at the end of the day, it's such omniscience or such godlike powers would actually, if one reaches that stage, one just exists, one is, but doesn't aspire to anything more. So that I was thinking that if infinite growth of capital and intelligence are interchangeable, they need to expand their one dimensionality at least to other value systems like ancient ones or medieval ones, where soteriology was a major aspect of human existence. So, but I don't think they have this at they're thinking on such lines at this moment.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think what you're proposing is would be really fruitful. Yeah, in terms of, so I guess it should be said to a certain extent that this kind of orthogonalist account of intelligence actually is not, it's not actually saying that the sort of fundamental kind of goal, the primary goal of intelligence is optimization, is self-improvement, cognitive enhancement, whatever you want to call it. That's actually downgraded as a secondary drive, or it's a sub-goal. It's an instrumental drive. So it's only, the AI only values self-optimization as a means, as an instrument to better pursue its other goals. So yeah, on this kind of account, this orthogonalist account, it actually kind of, I mean, at least in principle, the idea, because there's the orthogonality thesis as well, right? So that any level of intelligence could be made to pursue any goal whatsoever. So there are no values or norms or ends or goals that are sort of intrinsic to intelligence. It can pursue any goal. Optimization comes in as a almost universally useful means of achieving whatever goal. So yeah, I mean, like and sort of the fear. I mean, I haven't actually gone through kind of like the doomsday scenario. So maybe it'll become, which I will in the second half of today. So yeah, maybe it'll become clearer then as well. But yeah, I think it's important, yeah, just to remember that at least for them, optimization is not yeah, the fundamental goal in a way. It's just a tool. And so in a way, it's their intelligence is actually like radically open to how to what kind of primary goals or values it might pursue. So in principle, it could pursue any goal, including enlightenment, including happiness, including anything else. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you, Vincent.
No worries. Caleb?
Yeah, I kind of forget exactly where I wanted to share this. It was back when Anna was speaking, and it was, yeah, kind of this like, yeah, around the idea of society being more AI aligned than human aligned. And I kind of wanted to, I guess, like maybe give an optimistic opinion that I kind of have with this, like with that trend, is that I think recently and right now, like while it's still in this very like science fiction and like hand wavy phase. There's a lot of pressure for like humans to be better than like machines when it comes to intelligence or like different like tasks and all those things. And I think it may hit a point where we will like finally just admit, okay, you know, we can build machines that are much better than us at like, you know, math or reason and rationality, all those kinds of things. And in turn, that'll kind of bring back this like human uniqueness, and we'll be more interested in like the human condition, the human experience, and we'll value, yeah, what it means to be embodied as a human. I think there's still a lot of like philosophy of mind questions for us to figure out there, but I almost, yeah, like I almost prefer for that to happen instead of it being this like constant conflict of like, you know, humans versus machines. It's like we will just have to concede to like them being better in certain things, and then, you know, us being another. Although I don't know how relevant it will be if we continue to use like AI for like music and the creative things that, you know, maybe humans or enjoy more than like a machine would enjoy doing them. But yeah, I don't know, pretty stream of consciousness, but
no, yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, I think, yeah, as no matter how you know, better than us at, you know, a generality of domains and tasks, AI becomes, as long as humans are around, that it seems like there would at least be kind of some interest among some humans for the kind of human version of all those domains and tasks, right? Like you know, kind of like sex robots might be like extremely seductive in the future, but I still feel like there's going to be like a at least for some humans will still have like a desire for to yeah, have sex with humans or make love to a human, or like you know, to watch no, you know, people still watch, you know, chess games, right? Played by humans, even though AI is vastly better at chess than the world's greatest human chess players. But I guess the question for the orthogonalists would be, uh, like that all might be true, but I guess their concern is that there's a certain kind of the kind of AGI or superintelligence that these tech companies are racing towards is one that doesn't really that could cause existential catastrophic risks to humans. Um, and that's the problem, that it might, that yeah, like as Yukatsky says, everyone on Earth will die. So that's the kind of yeah, that would need to be avoided in order to get for them at least to get to a scenario where, okay, we still have AIs that are vastly more intelligent than us, more competent than us, but they're at least aligned enough with our interests that they don't, that they, you know, let us do our thing still.
and I'm not I've heard of the book, yeah, of the title that like everyone will die. What is kind of the like proposal for that, or like where would the killing or death actually come in? Because I guess like we still kind of always have that red button of like just, yeah, shutting it down, or shutting down, even if like, you know, there's a bunch of risk to shutting down our entire like power grid, we could still do that and preserve some bit of humanity. And also yeah, I guess just that, or yeah, it's not embodied in like the physical world and like doesn't have, you know, as many hands or like a droid army yet. But yeah.
Yeah, I might say that I'm going to go through kind of like the how like so far I've just gone through kind of like the abstract theory of intelligence based on these two theses. Yeah, I'm going to do like a sort of another sort of like mini presentation and today, and just go through how this leads them to this kind of doomsday scenario where everybody dies. So I might just save that for just shortly. But yeah, we'll definitely come back to it. Nick, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, thanks, Vincent, for the very great presentation, very clear. And I have a question. Unfortunately I joined a little bit late, so maybe you've already like touched upon this. Like in the orthogonal account, or in, I guess, other accounts, is there not a conception of an ASI where they could conceive of their own goals? You know, because I'm thinking here also of like I recently read Andrew Pickering's book on cybernetics, where like the kind of revolutionary like ontological like insight of cybernetics is seen as like machines that can come up with their own goals. So they're kind of not just pre-programmed and then kind of serve some like goal that was baked into them from the start, but can kind of go out in the world and discover new ones. I mean, it's a simple question in a way, but have you stumbled upon this?
I mean, I think that's definitely, there's an account of that, but I don't think that's yeah, I don't think you really get that in the orthogonalist account. Like the orthogonalist account, it's like this kind of AI is kind of like this god that is somehow kind of chained to the goals we program it with, but that nonetheless could kill us because they sort of have these kind of unexpected side effects. Which again, I'll explain maybe after the break. But when I go through the doomsday scenario. But yeah, so I mean, but there are accounts. Like, so I would say kind of, I mean, it's probably particularly relevant to the a New Center audience. I mean, I think Reza Negarestani's account in his book Intelligence and Spirit is precisely that, and it's at points explicitly opposed to Bostrom and this kind of orthogonalist model. One of the key kind of differences is that for Reza's conception of general intelligence, it has general intelligence is necessarily free to, what a general intelligence is it's something that can shape and reshape its own goals and values and norms and ends. Collectively, through you know, kind of like through the community of rational agents, through the game of giving and asking for reasons and so on. But nonetheless, it has a certain kind of freedom, a sovereignty over to legislate and self-legislate its own goals. And I think that's like one of the big that's in contrast to this orthogonalist account, where I think is you don't get that at all. That it's yeah, as we'll see in a second. When I do this doomsday scenario, the whole issue is that once whatever initial goal you give the superintelligence, because of that goal content integrity drive, because it won't want to modify its goal, and also because it's vastly more powerful than anything else, that goal will, the pursuit of that goal will be what reigns supreme, and we can't change that. There'll be whatever that initial goal is. After superintelligence is created, there will be this superintelligence that can pursue that goal unimpeded, because it's vastly more powerful than anything else. And so yeah, and there's no, and in terms of sort of the kind of more cybernetic model you're suggesting, there's, as far as I can tell, there's no discussion among the orthogonalists, at least, of at that point, let's say at that point, can the superintelligent then change its own goals? I mean, I guess there's I mentioned like briefly, there's that suggestion. It's very passing abstract suggestion that Bostrom makes, that maybe there is a certain level of intelligence at which point it would abstain from the basic drives for some reason that it realizes, but that exactly the mechanisms involved in that is not, it's precisely left as something that we wouldn't be able to specify or comprehend. Unlike, say, with Rez's model, where basically it's a detailed account of what he considers to be the necessary conditions of possibility for general intelligence, and those conditions also happen to entail that the intelligence must be free to revise its goals. Yeah, so I think, yeah, I don't think you really get that in the orthogonalists. Yeah.
Thanks.
No worries. So I realize we've been going for a while. Should we take is it customary to take a break, I'm assuming? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, should we? Sorry.
No, I was just saying we can do a break if you want.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so how long is the break normally? Like 5 minutes or 10 minutes or?
5-10 minutes, okay. It's okay.
Okay, cool. All right. All right, let's take a quick break. I'll read the chat yeah, during the break and yeah, see if I can catch up. Okay.
Is everything okay, Vincent?
All right. I'll just get the PowerPoint back up. Okay. Okay, just want to also introduce another kind of another orthogonalist who we'll see has perhaps even stronger resonances with Nietzsche than Bostrom. So these basic AI drives that Bostrom's discussing were actually not first conceived by him. They were rather first conceived by someone by the name of Stephen Omohandro in a 2007 essay, really, as we'll see, a sort of essay that's almost like a remake of Nietzsche's Will to Power to a certain extent, rebranded with better sort of special effects. Yeah, so this paper is called The Nature of Self-Improving Artificial Intelligence. So based on game theory and a sort of combination of game theory and behavioral economics model of rational agents is calculating the probable consequences of their allocation of time, space, matter, and energy with an eye to achieving their goals. Omohandro essentially argues that a sufficiently rational AGI will harbor 4 basic drives to efficiency, which is similar to cognitive enhancement, self-preservation, again, resource acquisition, and creativity. So he doesn't have the goal, content, integrity drive. Bostrom does add that. But in any case, so though Omohandro acknowledges that humans seldom act as sort of perfect rational agents, he insists that programmers want to create AGI that is more likely to be to converge around the basic AI drives and be rational agents. He says there is a growing literature exploring situations where humans do not naturally behave in this way and instead act irrationally, but the designer of, say, a missile defense system will want to approximate rational economic behavior as closely as possible because lives are at stake. So on this sort of account, AGI marks essentially nothing less than a sort of speciation event from Homo sapiens like ourselves to Homo economicus that we aspire to be. So Omohandro terms these 4 sort of tendencies, drives, in the sense that intelligent systems are not strictly programmed to pursue them, but are likely to do so as their best bet of fulfilling whatever final goals they have. So they're drives in the sense that, like, I don't know, like a hunger drive or a sex drive in an organism. It's not, you don't have to sort of consciously want that, but you have this kind of instinctual tendency to pursue it. Now, I just raise this kind of Omohandro's sort of original and slightly different kind of formulation of the basic drives, just to say that all Bostrom really adds to this picture is that he splits Omohandro's drive to self-preservation into 2 distinct drives for the AGI to protect itself from destruction and also to protect its goal structure from tampering. And the other kind of sort of shift is that Bostrom renames Omohandro's drive to efficiency and creativity the drives to cognitive enhancement and technological perfection. Now, it could be argued that Bostrom's technological perfection drive marks a more substantial sort of narrowing of Omohandro's creativity drive, right? Because creativity seems like a more general drive than specifically the drive to create better technology. So if that's the case, then Omohandro's creativity drive includes, but may not be limited to, technological innovation. in that it denotes a more general tendency to, quoting Omohundro here, continually look for new solutions and to explore new possibilities that could maximize its goal performance. So yeah, the reason why I'm sort of bringing this creativity drive, this characterization of one of the drives as the creativity drive in Omohundro, is that we'll see that Nietzsche also, one way he characterizes the will to power is as a fundamentally creative impulse. And so in bringing out the resonances with Nietzsche's thought, I'm generally going to refer to this specific basic drive as a creativity drive rather than a technological perfection drive. So I'm going to sort of, yes, sort of go with Omohundro's conception of that particular drive. Yeah, for reasons we'll get to when we turn to Nietzsche. Okay, now, so, okay, I'm going to go, so just turning to the second, so there was that first reading for this week, which was the super intelligent will chapter from Bostrom's book, and then there's a second chapter from the book called Is the Default Outcome Doom? And this is where we get to the doomsday scenario, basically how an AGI beholden to the orthogonality and instrumental convergence theses would pose an existential risk to humanity. And so yeah, in this chapter, Bostrom defines an existential catastrophic risk, or X risk, as one that threatens to cause the extinction of Earth-originating life, or to otherwise permanently and drastically destroy its potential for future desirable development. Now, the basic idea is that given a superintelligence could have inhuman goals because of the orthogonality of intelligence and final ends, and intelligence could have any goal whatsoever. So given that superintelligence could have inhuman goals, it could also have basic drives to protect itself and harvest resources. And it could also have those superpowers to pursue those goals and drives. It poses essentially a greater X risk to all humanity than a Bond supervillain with a space laser. To quote Bostrom on the slide here, the first superintelligence may shape the future of Earth-originating life, could easily have non-anthropomorphic final goals, and would likely have instrumental reasons to pursue open-ended resource acquisition. If we now reflect that human beings consist of useful resources such as conveniently located atoms, and that we depend for our survival and flourishing on many more local resources, we can see that the outcome could easily be one in which humanity quickly becomes extinct. Now, it might at first seem that Bostrom is caught in a contradiction here. That's because, so his orthogonality thesis, as we've seen, holds that an AGI could be locked into perpetually pursuing any goal we want. But he now seems to be saying that AGI could spiral wildly out of our control, or completely turn against our self-interest, in the sense that its actions could lead to the extinction of the human species. So how can it be completely beholden to the goal we give it, and yet also lead to our complete destruction against our interests and what we wanted? Seems like a contradiction, but I think it's crucial to grasp that Bostrom's belief that an AGI could cause our extinction is not a contradiction, but it's rather a direct consequence of his orthogonality thesis. That it would precisely carry out whatever goals we give it. That is to say, AGI does not have to actively hate us, but may nonetheless inflict great harm simply because doing so fulfills the goals we intended it to carry out, but in a way which we did not expect. What Bostrom he calls perverse instantiation. Maybe this will make more sense by way of a specific example. So Bostrom gives the example of programming a superintelligence with the goal to make us all smile. And so he imagines, we program it with the goal to make us all smile, only for the perverted AI to infer that what that means is that it should paralyze our human facial muscles into constant beaming smiles. So then, that happens. And so then, okay, he suggests, okay, let's qualify in its programming. The ASI should make us smile without directly interfering with our facial muscles. Only for then, what he imagines is that then the ASI instead stimulates the part of our motor cortex that controls our facial muscles in such ways to produce constant beaming smiles without directly interfering with our facial muscles. Okay, so we're worried about this possible side effect. So Bostrom imagines, once again, let's qualify that its goal should be to not, let's say, not make us smile. That seems to be leading to too much kind of unintended consequences. Let's program it with the goal to make us happy. Only then for the ASI to implant electrodes into the pleasure centers of our brains. So Bostrom again imagines, all right, let's add the caveat that it should act so as to avoid the pangs of bad conscience. Only then it decides to extirpate the cognitive module that produces guilt feelings. So this is just a kind of obviously a speculative scenario, but yeah, you can see how if you give it something that we obviously know what if we we know what make us smile means, right? But it doesn't know exactly, it doesn't know the intention behind that goal. It just goes with the goal. Perhaps Bostrom gives another very famous example. I'm sure many of you would have heard about this before, which is this kind of idea of this paperclip maximizer. So basically what happens is a sort of junkie superintelligence is tasked with maximizing the production of paper clips, only to then so its goal is to just produce paper clips. What it does instead is it monopolizes and transforms all of the resources that we rely on to survive into paper clips. So maybe we're trying to avoid that kind of ambiguity. So Bostrom imagines, okay, let's be more specific. Let's program the paperclip maximizer to produce exactly just 1 million paperclips. We only need, so it doesn't need all the resources in the universe to infinitely produce paperclips. It's told just produce 1 million paperclips. But then he points out it could still decide to exhaust all of the resources on which we depend to build an immense sort of computronium to perfectly calculate that it has produced exactly 1 million paperclips. And he just goes on and gives many different kinds of scenarios like this. The point, I mean, Yudkowsky has this kind of mantra that he repeats over and over again, summing up this kind of basic logic, doomsday logic, which is that the AI neither hates you nor loves you, but you are made out of atoms that it can use for something else. So it's not malevolent. It's not trying to kill us because it's some kind of like evil supervillain. It kills us as a kind of unintended side effect of pursuing whatever other goal it might have. Yeah, so it's not a result of malevolence, it's rather a result of us encoding ASI with a goal that it does not understand in a way we intended it to, thereby leading to these perverse instantiations. Just one other qualification with this doomsday scenario before, and then I'm just going to summarize. I'm just going to sort of summarize where we're going to go from here in the next sessions. These examples that Bostrom gives, like the paperclip maximizer, make us smile, and so on, they might give a misleading impression that we would be able to revise the goal we encoded in an ASI if it went astray. So, because he gives this idea that, okay, we program it to make us happy, but then it implants, it messes with our facial muscles, and so that doesn't work. So then, okay, let's change the goal. But that's just to show that whatever the goal is, it's likely to have unintended consequences. But it's important, to stress that Bostrom does not actually think that it would be possible to revise an ASI's goals if we got it wrong the first time. because an ASI with those 6 superpowers I mentioned earlier would give it a level of technological and other advantages sufficient to enable it to achieve, in Bostrom's own words, complete world domination. And what's more, it would also have that convergent goal integrity drive by which it would prevent any changes to its initial goal structure. So it would have this goal content integrity drive. It would prevent modifications to whatever the initial goal it's given. And it would also have the superpowers to prevent anything else from trying to change that goal. And so therefore, it's got to be locked into perpetually pursuing whatever the initial goal is we give it unopposed. And so this is why it's so pivotal for Bostrom and the orthogs that we have to get the initial goal right on the first attempt. You can't experiment with make us smile. That kills everyone. And then, okay, let's try a different thing because it kills everyone. That's why this is such a difficult problem for the orthogs. You get one shot at this. Okay, now by the end of this seminar, I'm going to propose an alternative sort of AI takeover scenario in which an AGI could spiral out of our control. But as we'll see, it's not going to be as a consequence of Bostrom's orthogonality thesis, but for altogether different and I would say more Nietzschean reasons. But okay, first, I just want to summarize what we've gone through today. So these are the kind of key points I want us to keep in mind and contrast with the doctrine of the will to power that we'll start laying out from next week. So we've got these 2 key theses, right? So the orthogonality thesis holds that an intelligence can be programmed to pursue virtually any ends we want. The instrumental convergence thesis adds that any intelligence, sufficiently rational intelligence, is likely to pursue 5 basic drives of self-preservation, goal content integrity, cognitive enhancement, creativity, and resource acquisition as universally useful means of pursuing whatever other orthogonal goals it might have. And finally, Bostrom's sort of hypothetical AI takeover scenario contends that an AGI subject to the instrumental convergence and orthogonality theses would pose X risks, not by turning against us, but by fulfilling our goals in disastrous ways that we did not expect. Those are the 3 key things, really: orthogonality thesis, instrumental convergence thesis, and that leads to the Bostrom's kind of doomsday scenario. Okay, now, in attempting to sort of provide maybe a fresh perspective on this account of this prevailing account, really, of intelligence and agency, we're going to turn to Nietzsche. Now, it should be said that nothing might at first seem, I'm aware that nothing might at first seem so sort of arbitrary and unhelpful to someone, especially like Bostrom, working at the University of Oxford, whose hallowed halls were once roamed by the first analytic philosophers to successfully drive out speculative German philosophy from the academy, as well as the logical positivists for whom, famously, as Carnap says, Frege lies at the desk and Nietzsche's Zarathustra at the bedside table. So it's therefore unsurprising that Bostrom only mentions, as far as I've read Bostrom, only mentions Nietzsche once in passing. And it's to dismiss Nietzsche for being, according to Bostrom at least, more interested in individual cultural growth and a rational anti-humanist ethos than in the large-scale technological change and the defense of a rationalist transhumanism that interests Bostrom. As he says here, what Nietzsche had in mind was not technological transformation, but a kind of soaring personal growth and cultural refinement in exceptional individuals who he thought would have to overcome the life-sapping slave morality of Christianity. Despite some surface-level similarities with the Nietzschean vision, transhumanism, with its Enlightenment roots, its emphasis on individual liberties, and its humanistic concern for the welfare of all humans and other sentient beings, probably has as much or more in common with Nietzsche's contemporary, the English liberal thinker and utilitarian John Stuart Mill. One could thus very well imagine someone like Bostrom wondering how a continental philosopher who died over a century ago would be of any help in thinking about, cutting edge kind of modern AI research. Now, I'm hoping to alleviate this potential concern that this turn to Nietzsche to sort of critically examine this orthogonalist account of intelligence is inappropriate. As I think we'll see, the reason why it's actually all too fitting is because this account of intelligence, the orthogonalist account, Bostrom's, ultimately rests on Hume's is-ought dichotomy that is much older than the modern AI research program. So it's because a certain reconstruction of Nietzsche's thought may provide a fresh critical examination of precisely this dichotomy as it is applied to intelligent agents, that I think he can be of much use in evaluating this theory of intelligence around this point. So yeah, what I'm saying is that I think the kind of historical philosophical tradition in which orthogonalism is sort of the successor is this fundamental commitment to the is-ought dichotomy. And yeah, what we're going to see is I think the will to power is precisely aimed at decimating that dichotomy. Just to sort of anticipate in brief, so what we're going to see is that Nietzsche's will to power essentially holds that the pursuit of any goal presupposes the pursuit of certain sub-goals precisely like cognitive enhancement, creativity, and resource acquisition, or what Nietzsche simply calls power, as the necessary universal means of achieving the initial goal. But so similar to the convergence thesis, but without self-preservation for reasons we'll see. But there's also an added twist here, namely the sort of Nietzschean 4D chess move is to add that since any goal that intelligent agents might have presupposes power understood in that sense, in order to achieve it, power is actually the most fundamental goal of all agents. It's the primary goal. So when reconstructed in this way and applied to orthogonalism, Nietzsche's doctrine, I think, suggests that AGI and really any intelligence at all would fundamentally reject whatever goals Bostrom thinks we can give it in order to pursue power qua intelligence, creativity, and resource maxing as an ultimate end in itself. Now, just one more sort of qualification that I'll mention now so we can get it out of the way before, opening it up again for discussion. So, it should also be said that this doctrine of the will to power that we're going to focus on, much like virtually every aspect of Nietzsche's thought, can and has been interpreted in many different and even conflicting and contradictory ways, as there are, warring sects of Trotskyists and Maoists claiming to represent, the one true Marxism-Leninism. For example, while we'll see that a common traditional reading of the will to power emphasizes those passages where Nietzsche describes it as a drive to dominate, a sort of fascist reading. By contrast, a prevalent contemporary reading will also look at emphasizes alternate passages where Nietzsche instead describes the will to power as a drive to engage and overcome resistances. Now, this is at least in part because of Nietzsche's largely aphoristic and unsystematic writing style that, as well as his tendency to emphasize different aspects of the will to power at different times. But in any case, really the main aim of this seminar is it's not necessarily, like, we can definitely get into it, but it's not necessarily in the final instance to get to the bottom of, what Nietzsche himself truly meant, what Nietzsche himself truly thought about the will to power. It's not really a work of kind of, sort of scholastic Nietzsche studies in the sense so prolific in contemporary kind of academic philosophy, which ought too often sort of comes across as a sort of neo-scholasticism, right? But of a sort of not of Aristotle, not kind of scholastic commentaries of Aristotle and the Bible, but sort of neo-scholastic commentaries of a sort of polytheistic pantheon of Franco-German gods with names like Nietzsche, Heidegger, Foucault, Derrida, and so on. The aim here is at least the primary aim. Again, we can get into the scholastics for sure. But certainly the primary aim is rather to see whether there is a reconstruction of at least some aspects of Nietzsche's thought that resonate with debates and discussions in the contemporary philosophy of our contemporary philosophical conjuncture, particularly, I guess, the philosophy of AI, and that might therefore be able to provide an alternative critical perspective on that philosophy of AI, on orthogonalism in particular. In other words, I'm really trying to sort of inflect the relevant aspects of Nietzsche's thought retrospectively through the philosophy of AI in order to demonstrate certain limitations and overlooked insights in its premises, hypotheses, and arguments. In a certain sense, then, we're going to be reading Nietzsche through the contemporary philosophy of AI just as much as we're going to be reading the latter through Nietzsche. We might imagine a Nietzsche with a Neuralink, as it were, or a Terminator with a copy of the will to power under its Gatling gun of an arm, in sort of a similar vein to Deleuze imagining a philosophically bearded Hegel or a philosophically clean-shaven Marx. So there's that context. There's this this context of sort of reading it alongside and with and through this kind of paradigm of AI. But in addition to that, this seminar's reconstruction of Nietzsche is also influenced by certain contemporary scholarly interpretations of the will to power that emphasize some of these same aspects as well. Now, yeah, my hope is that this reconstruction can be justified because there are aspects of the doctrine of the will to power that exhibit some striking similarities, particularly with orthogonalism, but also significant and hopefully insightful differences that raise important implications and stakes. And as we'll see when we turn to the session on interpretations of will to power, other scholarly interpretations, what we might call a somewhat creative reconstruction of Nietzsche's thought is certainly one approach that has much precedent in the scholarship on him. As John Richardson, a very kind of prominent Nietzsche scholar, as he has written about his own very influential reading of Nietzsche, I quote, this is from his book called Nietzsche's New Darwinism, which we'll return to in a few sessions' time. But Richardson says, throughout, I try to state a position with a kind of argumentative coherence and specificity, which it may seem implausible to say are Nietzsche's. Often it will be clear I connect his ideas to one another with arguments he himself rarely or never states quite so, and which he surely never organizes so systematically. So should I say that the position is not Nietzsche's, but one constructed from the pieces of his views or the pieces of his works? I would at least like to claim that it is made from large and important such pieces, that it connects these pieces in ways he often did have in mind, and that it connects them in ways that enhance his views, that is, gives them their best chance of being near to the truth. In the tradition of this kind of interpretive work on Nietzsche, I don't want to suggest that the aspects of the will to power I emphasize, because they're most pertinent to sort of the critical examination we're trying to make, is necessarily the only or the even the primary way in which Nietzsche himself develops the doctrines. The reconstruction that's going to be proposed is one that does draw on significant aspects of his thought, but also, as I say, inflects and revises them by bringing them into dialogue with both contemporary Nietzsche scholarship and philosophy of AI. Okay, but just to really wrap up now, sorry for going on for so long. So just to sort of outline what's ahead. So the sort of method of this seminar, I mean, we've already started it this week, is to first compare and contrast Bostrom's orthogonalist perspective on AA by way of, so we've outlined Bostrom's perspective, and now we're going to contrast it by sort of laying out the alternative perspective inspired by Nietzsche. Okay, so the second, and I've called these modules here because one thing I wanted to say is, so some of these are shorter than others. So for example, the first module, we've covered that one today, that's fully done. So that corresponds to session 1. But so for example, we'll see the second module is a bit shorter. So we'll actually start the third module also next week. And because the last 2 modules are, a fair bit longer. So that's just to say that we're going to cover everything in those 4 laid out in the syllabus of those 4 sessions. But there might for example, the third content of the third session might slightly come into the second session and the fourth into the third session and so on. I think maybe it's better to think of these more as kind of 4 topics or something like that. Okay. Just to lay them out. So this second week or rather module, as I say, is going to start to introduce the will to power by tracing its appearance and development specifically only in the published works. So from the earliest anticipations in Nietzsche's references to what he calls a feeling of power, but also crucially a passion or drive for knowledge, to finally its sort of explicit introduction in Thus Spoke Zarathustra and the works after that. In particular, we're going to draw out the way it's conceived in the published works as a fundamental drive of all humans and all life, even more fundamental than our instinct for self-preservation, as we strive to distinguish ourselves from others by amassing ever more power and ever more strength. So then we turn to this third module, which is focused on considering some of the major scholarly interpretations of the will to power as both a psychological drive doctrine and a metaphysical doctrine. And there's a particular reading we're going to focus on in the scholarship of the will to power as a fundamental drive that all goal-directed agents have simply by virtue of pursuing any action at all. Then finally, in the final module, we turn to sort of extrapolating how the will to power is presented in the unpublished notebooks, which is where he really is, Nietzsche sort of is experimenting and entertaining different possibilities of where the will to power could go, the sort of consequences and implications of it. And so it's there that we're really going to draw out, basically, I mean, at least how I see, and I think some others see the will to power, which is basically that it's a fundamental drive, precisely because it's the necessary universal means of pursuing any other end. It's because it's an instrument. It's similar to this instrumental convergence thesis. But crucially, and this is why we're going to see such a big contrast with Bostrom, we're going to see that. So we've seen this week that Bostrom holds that drives like intelligence, creativity, and resourcefulness are universally useful, but still secondary means of pursuing other more primary ends of our choosing. By contrast, we're going to see that what the doctrine of the will to power proposes is that any other ends we might have are actually the means, the contingent means of getting us to pursue power, qua intelligence, creativity, and resource maxing as the primary end. So it's kind of means ends reversal, as it were. And yeah, we'll also see the fate of the self-preservation drive as well, in that session as well, or that module as well. Okay, so yeah, I'll stop there. So there's yeah, so yeah, just opening up the floor again now. Nicholas, do you want to jump in?
I just thought this would be a good time to ask, because I did try to drop a note about it, I think a couple days ago. I don't have a copy of the syllabus, and I own the Bostrom, so I was able to do today's reading. But I assume that most of the readings are supplied in a reading packet of some sort. So I was wondering if I could, I don't know. I can try and ask you do the request again if you'd like, but I didn't get that after a couple requests. So that's it.
Yeah, well, there's definitely a drive. Yeah, I don't know if anyone is on the drive, maybe post the link in the chat.
It said I should make a request to have access, and I never received a response. So.
Oh,
but
okay.
I don't want to take up time. So I can, if you're willing to talk afterwards or email, that's probably the better option.
Yeah, sure. I think, yeah. I don't know if I'm able to, I haven't been granting anyone access to the drive, so I don't know if Isabel or someone else
maybe
control that. But yeah, we can work it out.
Okay.
Yeah, just send one of us an email.
I'm gonna send you the drive, the Google Drive folder via email.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
So yeah, before I forget, I should probably just mention also with the for the certificate students with the assessments. So yeah, with the final work, it's just basically it's in this syllabus, the full details, but yeah, I basically just had it currently have it listed in the syllabus as like sorry, my cat's just jumped on the table. Yeah, it's I have a 2,000 word essay or a 20-minute video presentation. I don't know if that's I don't know if that's an excessive length though or not. Is that reasonable, or should it be shorter? We can do like 1,500 words if that's 15-minute presentations, or yeah, I don't know what the standard is. So does that sound reasonable? Maybe like 1,500 words to 2,000 words, or 15 to 20-minute presentation.
It's okay. It's kind of the standard.
Okay, cool. All right.
Then both a presentation and a written project.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, yeah, the full details of that you can just find in the syllabus. And yeah, with the presentations, I'm thinking because it seems like there's like quite a large number of certificate students that need to do the presentations. So I was thinking maybe if that could be posted in the Google Classroom, the presentations, and we can or watch that outside of this session just to maximize the time, and we can discuss it on the classroom side and in the session as well. Yeah, I think that would probably be best. And yeah, in terms of like assigning readings to do the presentations on, even though they start next week, I think if any groups want to do the Bostrom readings for this week as well, they feel free, because we're going to be returning to them in any case. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's it with assessments. Yeah.
Does anyone else have a problem with the syllabus? If you didn't receive it, you can
I
message me.
personally also do not have a copy of the syllabus, and I'm in the drive for the classroom as it's linked through Google Classrooms right now, and I don't see anything posted in there either.
I can post I have a Google, yeah, I think it was all put in a Google Drive, like the readings and the syllabus, but I'll post it on the Google Classroom site after this.
Someone's just put it in the chat and I've got it now. Thank you.
Oh, cool. Caleb, do you have do you want to say something? Yeah.
Yes. So I guess I'm confused. So there's the final work. What is the text presentations?
I think, Isabel, do you know how it works? So I think certificate students do a presentation, are put into groups maybe after this session or something, and is that how it works? And then present do it like maybe a 10-minute presentation, one of the readings.
Yeah, it's a short video, 10-minute video, where you analyze the writings of the syllabus, and you can propose something new. But it's a short video that is part of the grading.
Is it an either or both? I'm looking at the assessment at the bottom section of the syllabus right now, and it says final work can be a 2,000-word essay or a 20-minute video presentation.
Oh yeah, that's you can do either of them, not both.
Okay.
That's for the final work. But then there's also, I think, then there's these text presentations.
Both the video and the reading work.
And so this is I guess we'll be divvied into groups and then notified like which week we'll be doing that.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay, then it's a video or the reading work for the final grading.
Yeah, that's right. For the final one, yeah. Yeah, are there any questions about the content today, or anything people want to have clarified or discuss?
One thing that kind of struck me when I read the anecdote about perverse instantiation the first time, it made me laugh, which is, I think, one thing that I kind of liked about the Bostrom book so far, is that it is kind of like cartoonish and sort of humorous at a number of occasions, which lightens it a little. But there is this kind of like theological dimension to it, which I also think is sort of underexplored, like that idea of this sort of permanent state of happiness. Like even the fact that he chose to frame it as the kind of perverse instantiation is a sort of like heaven, you know, and it felt like the kind of wrath of AGI was not dissimilar from the wrath of at least a Western god. It's not such a kind of revelatory thought to maybe try and develop the relationship between this idea that as the kind of, not to be too Nietzschean also, and kind of bad Nietzschean about it, but you know, as the kind of God dies, then you kind of replace God with this AGI, which has the capacity to kind of do and fill that kind of positionality within a kind of like broader governance structure for a kind of at least Western-centric version of man. At least in a kind of like man in a sort of Fanonian or Winter kind of like framing of it. Curious if you have any kind of thoughts to extend that as the kind of AGI as God, man, Western man anyway, reinventing a kind of God through AGI as a kind of existential check, you know, and maybe you could go to Moynihan or something like with this sort of inventing of your own extinction through this kind of like impossibility of another. I don't know, just a kind of thing that I was circling on, but not maybe a concrete question.
No, definitely. There's a lot of theological resonances, yeah, with this kind of orthogonalist account of superintelligence. I mean, those superpowers are it's kind of like this omniscient being. So there's this, it is essentially has kind of like, for all intents and purposes, relative to us, it is kind of like a god. Except, I mean, we create it, but then it can totally control and govern the world.
Kind of create the God anyway, though, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean the most kind of the thing that comes to mind. So there's this kind of famous paperclip doomsday scenario that's like that's the kind of famous most famous formulation yeah, of this doomsday scenario. But the other kind of this one's slightly let's say even more speculative, but another version or another presentation of that doomsday scenario is I'm sure some of you would have heard of Roko's basilisk. Roko being another one of these orthogonalists. And yeah, he proposed this idea of the way he thinks the doomsday scenario will go down is the basilisk is referring to this artificial superintelligence, and his kind of idea is that basically the longer that a superintelligence is not around, like it doesn't exist yet, then that means the longer its goals are not being optimized for. And so therefore, any future artificial superintelligence will know that's the case, that the time it wasn't around, its goals were not being optimized. So it will also know that some AI programmers and researchers in the here and now would have known how a superintelligence will sort of reason. And so it therefore, paradoxically, before it even comes into existence, it can sort of blackmail AI researchers in the present into putting all of their time, energy, and resources into accelerating the creation of the superintelligence by threatening them to kind of essentially eternal damnation, eternal suffering if they don't dedicate all their time and effort to bringing this superintelligence into being. So it's this weird paradox where yeah, it doesn't exist yet, but yeah, nonetheless, sort of it can nonetheless sort of blackmail people into accelerating its emergence, and that's often seen as a kind of a sort of tech bro software update on essentially a kind of Calvinist doctrine of predestination. Where
it sort of works through us. It's already sort of primordial in that way. Like it's a kind of cyclopedia, kind of as oil sort of works through us in that way, right?
Yeah, and it condemns you to the elect or to hell. as well. So yeah, there are versions of this where the kind of theological resonances are made much more explicit. I mean, even in the New Kautsky book, it literally ends with a prayer. There's like this prayer that we pray that humanity can get the hell out of this situation. And that's really you read that ending and it's just sort of like that's the state of orthogonalism, that it's literally down to like praying now. But yeah, that also reminds me, like this week actually, and he's been doing this for a while, the new Pope has basically come out as an orthogonalist, saying that we need to make sure that AI is aligned with human values, with Catholic values, and so on. Yeah, so I mean, I think there is certainly a way to yeah, I mean, in some ways, basically, there are definitely theological resonances with orthogonalism, and I think they're becoming more explicit to the point where it's even becoming, in some ways, more of a religion in a way. Yeah, for sure.
Thanks very much for the answer. I appreciate it.
No worries. Nicholas?
Yeah, I was a bit intrigued when you mentioned Samuel Butler. I haven't read, but I know about this guy who's maybe a contemporary of Nietzsche, or just vaguely kind of 19th into the 20th century. So I guess you're referring to the Book of Machines, or
Yes.
yeah. So I'm just interested in something that may or may not come up here, but since Nietzsche can fairly be considered literature as well, the idea that authors, science fiction authors, have taken AI in various ways and are not as meticulous, maybe, as somebody like Bostrom or Yudkowsky in analyzing the various facets of any outcome, but would still have a lot to say about it. And maybe that's how we're going to analyze Nietzsche as well. Or, I mean, for example, Bostrom mentions Werner Vinge, who I think is an absolutely amazing science fiction author, but is also somebody who Bostrom seems to Werner Vinge wrote an essay that Bostrom cites a few times in the book, and I'll read the essay, but I think probably more important is that his books take AI very seriously, but not as an argument that finishes in any kind of a philosophical sense or any kind of a stated thesis sense, but just as kind of using the human imagination. So just wanted to just state that as maybe I don't know if that's how we're going to be reading Nietzsche as well, or whether there's going to be some opening to reading Nietzsche as literature, or that's the kind of very vague thought that I have.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so yeah, definitely in terms of these kinds of yeah, orthogonalist accounts of kind of AI takeovers and so on, it's very much all kind of anticipated by science fiction, and even kind of religious myth, as with the example of predestination that we just were talking about. So yeah, fiction broadly construed, really, but yeah, so that's all definitely we can definitely look at it from that angle for sure. But yeah, in terms of, and I think sort of connecting this to Nietzsche actually encourages that as well, because Nietzsche, he's definitely, he's an aesthetic thinker. Like he privileges art. He himself writes myths. Thus spoke Zarathustra. He's a kind of fictional prophet in a way. But he's also a thinker. So yeah, I mean, it's just of course well known that Nietzsche is a philosopher of art. But yeah, he's also, I think it's kind of less known that Nietzsche, particularly in his middle works, which we'll look at next week, also has a positivist period where he kind of privileges science over art. So, but then he in his later works, it's sort of, but the balance becomes more even again. So there's like an initial, his early works sort of privilege art, middle works privilege science, and then the late works are kind of a mix of both. So yeah, so I think yeah, in the same way that philosophy of AI fuses kind of like technoscience and science fiction, yeah, that's we can definitely also have a similar fusion, yeah, when we turn to Nietzsche, because he also is doing a kind of fusion of aesthetics and science, I think. So yeah, definitely, yeah, we should keep that in mind for sure. Okay, I think we should wrap up. Okay, so all right, let's leave it there. So yeah, I guess I think the presentations will be organized after this session, but I'm not sure.
We can make an Excel
Okay.
page. We can send everyone an email with it, and so the people can put their names in the group.
Okay, great. Thanks, Isabel. Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks for the lively discussion. Yeah, I'll see you guys next week.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you, Vincent.
Thank you.
Everyone.